The moment the barn ignited, Clara knew her life had changed forever. Smoke twisted into the crimson sunset, stinging her eyes and curling into her hair as she clutched her crying baby against her chest. The acrid scent of burning hay and charred timber filled the air, mixing with the tang of sweat and dust from the panicked townsfolk who had gathered along the outskirts. Their faces were pale and accusing, whispers ricocheting between splintered fences and cracked boards. She could feel the judgment before she even saw it, their murmurs telling her she had brought this disaster upon herself. Her baby, a tiny girl with wide, dark eyes and wisps of hair curling against her forehead, whimpered softly. Clara pressed her lips to the infant's temple, her voice trembling. It's okay, baby. Mama's here. But the noise of the fire drowned out her soothing words, and the heat from the flames made her heart pound as if trying to escape her chest. Sparks rained down like tiny shooting stars, igniting dry patches of grass, and Clara's thoughts scattered like the embers around her. From the shadows beyond the flames, a figure emerged. He moved with a calm certainty that cut through the chaos, a contrast to the fear-stricken panic of the crowd. Broad-shouldered, his chest bare, the muscles beneath bronzed skin rippling as he walked toward her. Long black hair, streaked with the dust of the plains, fell over his shoulders and caught the last rays of the dying sun. Turquoise beads and bone charms glimmered against his chest, swinging with every purposeful step. His eyes dark, steady, unyielding met hers, and in that instant Clara felt a strange mixture of fear, hope, and awe. The crowd hesitated, murmuring in disbelief as the warrior strode closer. "Move back," he said, his voice low but commanding. The timbre carried over the roar of the fire, silencing some of the whispers. Clara's breath caught. No one else had spoken to protect her, and yet here he was, stepping into a danger. They all feared, as if the flames themselves dared not touch him. Clara tried to step forward, but her legs trembled. The barn groaned and shifted, a crack of splintering wood echoing across the open plains. She had no time to think, only the instinct to shield her baby. The warrior extended a hand without hesitation, his dark eyes steady on hers. "Give me the child," he said simply. There was no menace, no demand, only certainty, as though he had been born to this moment, and this moment to him. Tears blurred her vision, smoke curling into her lungs with every panicked breath. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then surrendered. The baby to his strong arms. His hands, rough and calloused from years under the sun, were gentle as he cradled her daughter, holding her close against his chest. The baby quieted almost instantly, lulled by the warmth radiating from him, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat matching the infant's own. Clara had never seen such a calming presence, even in the quietest of nights. "You're safe," he murmured. To the child, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken promises. "I won't let them hurt you." Clara's pulse quickened. Who was he? Why would he risk himself for us? She didn't have time to question. The barn wall nearest them sagged and cracked, and a beam tumbled downward, scattering embers and dust. Without a pause, the warrior lifted her in one arm while keeping the baby secure against his chest. The townsfolk gasped, some stepping back, others frozen with fear and disbelief. As he strode through the inferno with a grace that defied logic, they emerged into the open air, the sun dipping lower behind distant hills, casting the smoke in hues of gold, crimson, and violet. Clara inhaled deeply, the fire's heat fading, replaced by the cool whisper of the evening wind. The baby stirred, opening wide eyes and peering at the vast open plains that stretched beyond the town. Clara clutched the warrior's arm, her fingers brushing against his tanned, scarred skin, seeking confirmation that this was real, that they were truly safe. He met her gaze, a faint, solemn nod acknowledging her fear, her uncertainty, her relief. Then, without a word, he turned his attention back to the embers, eyes scanning the town for threats. Clara realized with a mixture of astonishment and something like hope that for the first time in days she didn't feel completely alone. And somehow, even amid the smoke and ruin, she knew that whatever this man was, whatever force of courage had brought him to her life had just begun to change. The wind carried the scent of smoke and charred timber long after they had left the burning barn behind. Clara's chest heaved as she struggled to calm her racing heart. Her baby girl, swaddled in a blanket hastily torn from her own coat, nestled against the warrior's forearm, eyes wide and blinking at the flickering light of the distant fire. The plains stretched endlessly around them, golden in the dying sunlight, dotted with tufts of dry grass swaying in the breeze. It was beautiful, but Clara's mind refused to appreciate it. Danger lingered in every whispering gust. The warrior walked with quiet purpose, each step deliberate, as though he had mapped every inch of the land. He didn't speak immediately, and Clara, trembling and exhausted, could only watch him. His presence was paradoxical, intimidating, yet oddly reassuring. Muscles tensed beneath bronzed skin, every movement precise and controlled. Turquoise and bone beads glimmered along his chest, catching the last rays of sun like fragments of a fallen sky. He exuded strength, authority, and something more elusive, an unwavering protection that seemed to radiate from him like heat from a fire. Finally, he stopped near a shallow ravine, the earth damp beneath their boots. "We will rest here," he said, his voice low but firm. Clara could hear the weight of command, the unshakable certainty that they were safe for now. The baby stirred, fussing slightly, and he shifted her gently, holding her close to his chest. Clara swallowed hard, her fingers brushing against his arm as if seeking proof he was real. "Thank you," she whispered, though her voice was hoarse and small. He met her eyes briefly, then looked away, scanning the horizon with the precision of a seasoned hunter. "We must keep moving until night falls," he said. "The town will not forgive easily, and others may come." Clara's stomach tightened. She wanted to ask questions, his name, why he had saved them, what danger truly lay ahead, but her voice caught in her throat. She realized with sudden clarity that words were secondary to survival. Action spoke louder, and this warrior's actions had already defied everything she had ever known about safety. Trust and courage. The baby yawned, stretching tiny fingers, and the warrior smiled faintly, a gesture so rare and fleeting that Clara blinked in surprise. "She will sleep," he said softly. "As long as we stay close to the river, she will be safe." He guided them to a small bend where a narrow stream reflected the sunset in silvery shards. The gentle sound of flowing water mingled with the whispering grass, creating a fragile sense of peace. Clara knelt by the edge, cupping water to wash soot from the baby's face. Her hand shook, but he did not intervene, only watched over them silently, like a shadow shaped in human form. Night descended with a slow, deliberate calm, painting the sky in indigo and violet. Stars blinked awake, scattered like shards of broken glass, and the air cooled, carrying the scent of sage and damp earth. Clara huddled close to him, her small frame pressed against his side as if seeking warmth from both his body and his presence. The baby, finally lulled by the rhythm of the stream and the steady strength beside her, drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep. "Who are you?" Clara asked at last, her voice barely audible in the night. The warrior remained silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Then, finally, he answered, his tone quiet but resolute. "I am Aelin," he said, the name heavy with history, with unspoken battles and ancient honor. "I come from the plains far to the west. My people taught me to protect those who cannot protect themselves." His eyes, dark and steady, met hers. And Clara felt something shift inside her, fragile thread of trust weaving itself in the aftermath of terror. The sound of distant hooves made her flinch, and Aylin's body tensed immediately, every muscle coiled like a spring. "We are not alone," he murmured, almost to himself. Clara's heart leapt into her throat. Danger had not passed. It had merely followed them to this temporary sanctuary. Yet somehow, watching him so fearless, so deliberate, so utterly devoted to the safety of her and her daughter, she began to feel that they might survive. Perhaps she thought with a small, desperate hope. Survival was not just about escaping danger. It was about trusting someone willing to face it for you. As the night deepened, Aylin settled beside her, keeping watch while she and the baby rested. The fireflies danced over the stream, and the cool night air carried whispers of the plains, of freedom and danger intertwined. Clara pressed her cheek against the baby's hair and, for the first time in days, allowed herself a quiet sigh. The world was still harsh, the threat still real, but for this one night, they were alive and together in the silent protection of a warrior who seemed to defy the very chaos around them. The night pressed in around them like a velvet cloak, cool and heavy. Yet the faint rustle of distant grasses and the soft babble of the stream kept Clara's senses alert. Aylin remained at her side, the baby cradled securely in his arms. The gentle rise and fall of the child's chest, mirrored by the steady rhythm of his own breathing, was oddly reassuring. For a moment, Clara allowed herself to believe that the terror of the town, the fire, and the judgmental eyes had receded. But deep down, she knew the world outside this temporary haven still carried shadows of danger. They had moved farther from the town, guided by Aylin's silent intuition. Clara noticed how he seemed to know every contour of the land, the dip of the ravine where water pooled, the clusters of sagebrush that could hide them from pursuers, and even the faint trail of hoof prints in the dirt that suggested other riders might be approaching. She wondered how much he had seen, how many battles he had survived. There was a weight to him, an unspoken history in his dark eyes that made her feel both safe and profoundly uneasy. "Why are you helping me?" she asked finally, her voice trembling as she adjusted the blanket around the baby. Her hands lingered on Aylin's arm, seeking comfort and confirmation. His gaze held hers, unwavering, and he replied softly, "Because no child, no mother, should fear the ground they walk upon." There was no hesitation in his voice, no expectation of thanks. It was a simple statement of principle, spoken with the certainty of a man who had faced countless dangers and lost far too many along the way. Clara's chest tightened. She felt gratitude, fear, and a flicker of trust all at once. The baby stirred, tiny hands brushing against Aylin's chest, and he smiled faintly, a rare, fleeting expression that softened the hardened lines of his face. "She is strong," he said, almost to himself, "but she needs you as much as you need her." Clara felt her throat tighten. Somehow, hearing him speak so gently to her child made the world feel slightly less cruel. They settled near a cluster of tall pines, their needles whispering in the night breeze. Aylin knelt to inspect the ground, his fingers tracing subtle signs in the dirt, a broken twig, a disturbed patch of soil, while Clara tended to the baby, brushing soot from her hair, and murmuring soft lullabies. Despite the danger that still lingered beyond the trees, there was a fragile sense of peace in the small camp. The moon rose above the horizon, casting silver light across the plains, painting their temporary refuge in a dreamlike glow. Clara hesitated, her mind teetering between relief and lingering doubt. "Who are you, really?" she asked. "Why risk yourself for us?" Aylin's eyes flicked to hers, a shadow of pain passing over his features before settling into the stoic calm that had drawn her to him in the first place. "I am Aylin," he said, his voice low and measured. "I have walked this land for years, guided by a code older than most towns and older than fear itself. I protect those who cannot defend themselves. That is all you need to know for now. Clara's heart ached with questions she dared not voice. His words were a shield and a mystery all at once. She could sense the scars beneath his calm exterior, the battles he had fought and survived. Trusting him felt as precarious as walking across a canyon on a narrow plank. Yet the warmth of his presence, the way he held her child with reverent care, was magnetic. A distant howl cut through the night, and Aylin's posture stiffened immediately. Clara's pulse quickened. Her hands instinctively gripped his arm. "They are close," he murmured, scanning the horizon. Every sense in his body seemed tuned to danger, every muscle coiled in readiness. Clara realized with a sudden jolt that he had been silently guarding them the entire journey, not just with strength, but with intuition and awareness she could barely comprehend. She took a deep, shuddering breath, pressing her cheek to the baby's hair. "I don't know if I can ever repay you," she whispered. Aylin's eyes softened for a fraction of a second, and then he returned to his watchful stance. "You need not," he said. "Live, survive, that is enough." The night stretched on, the gentle sound of the stream and the whispering trees, lulling Clara into a fragile sense of hope. For the first time since the fire, she felt the tiniest flicker of safety, an ember of trust that maybe, just maybe, they could endure what lay ahead. And somewhere deep in her chest, a quiet thought began to take root. Perhaps survival was not only about escaping danger, but about finding someone willing to face it alongside you. Dawn broke over the plains in streaks of fire orange and gold, illuminating the endless expanse of dry grass and distant hills. Clara pressed the baby closer to her chest, the small bundle squirming slightly in the early morning light. She could feel every beat of her own heart, fast and erratic, mirroring the fear and adrenaline that pulsed through her veins. Aylin's horse pawed at the ground beside them, muscles coiled and ready. The warrior himself sat tall, chest bare, bronzed, skin gleaming, long black hair whipping behind him in the morning wind. Turquoise and bone jewelry swung with every motion, catching the sun's first rays like scattered fire. They rode in tense silence at first. Clara had learned that Aylin's intuition required focus. Any unnecessary words could distract him from dangers she could barely perceive. Dust rose behind them in golden clouds, wrapping around the legs of their horses and clinging to their skin and clothes. The plains were deceptively beautiful, endless and open, yet every curve of the distant hills could hide riders or hunters lying in wait. Clara's fingers dug into the reins, knuckles white as she scanned the horizon. She could sense movement in her periphery, fleeting shadows that vanished as soon as she tried to focus. "They are following us," Aylin said finally, his voice calm but sharp, like a blade cutting through the morning air. Clara's stomach dropped. The distant shapes of riders emerged on the horizon, silhouettes against the rising sun. She didn't recognize the uniforms or faces, only the unmistakable intent in their posture, pursuers bent on reclaiming what they considered stolen. Her breath caught in her throat, but Aylin's hand rested briefly on her arm, steadying her. "Stay close to me," he instructed, and she obeyed instinctively. His eyes swept the landscape, reading every line of the hills, every tuft of grass, every shadow cast by the rising sun. There was no panic in him, only precise calculation. Clara realized that this was why he had saved them so effortlessly from the fire. He could see threats before they even appeared, predict movements, anticipate danger. It was as though the plains themselves had trained him, molding him into a force of nature she could rely on. The baby stirred, a tiny yawn escaping her lips. Clara held her closer, murmuring soft reassurances she didn't fully believe. Yet Aylin's presence lent her courage. He leaned slightly, whispering, keep her calm. They will not reach us if we move wisely." His voice was low, authoritative, yet comforting, a strange paradox that made Clara's chest tighten. She glanced at him, watching the sharp focus in his dark eyes, the tension in his muscles, the way his fingers lightly brushed the reins as though he and his horse were one. The riders drew closer, their dust cloud thickening like an ominous curtain on the horizon. Aelin's lips pressed into a thin line, and Clara could see the determination etched into every line of his bronzed face. "We will make the river bend before them. There, the terrain favors us," he said. He urged their horses forward. There, hooves pounding against the dry, cracked earth in a rhythm that matched her own heartbeat. The wind tore across the plains, carrying the scent of dust, sage, and distant fire from the town they had left behind. Hours passed in tense motion. Clara could feel the heat of the sun climbing, the weight of exhaustion settling into her muscles. Yet Aelin did not falter. Every shift of the baby, every stumble of the horse, every whisper of the wind was accounted for. She realized that survival was not merely a matter of fleeing. It was strategy, skill, and trust in the one who guided them. She had no choice but to surrender herself to it, to believe in him even as fear gnawed at her resolve. Finally, the river bend appeared, a ribbon of silver cutting through the golden plains. Aelin guided them to the edge, muscles coiled as he assessed the terrain. Clara's chest lifted with relief, though she did not dare celebrate. From this vantage, the pursuing riders would struggle to approach without exposing themselves. She pressed the baby to her shoulder, feeling the warmth of life in her arms, and for the first time in days, allowed herself a tentative hope. Aelin's eyes met hers, steady, unwavering. "We are not safe yet," he said. "But here, we have a chance," Clara nodded, heart pounding with fear, awe, and a budding trust she had never thought possible. She realized then that survival was not just about distance, but about the courage and skill of the one who refused to let you fall. And in Aelin, she had found such a protector, a force as fierce and untamed as the plains themselves. The hidden canyon appeared like a secret carved by time itself. High rock walls rose on either side, etched with ancient markings that whispered of generations long gone. The sun had climbed higher now, casting golden shafts of light that danced across the rugged terrain, illuminating the narrow path that led to a small pool fed by a trickling spring. Clara felt a fleeting sense of awe and relief. For the first time in days, the chaos of the town, the fire, and the relentless pursuit seemed distant, almost unreal. Aelin guided them carefully down the winding path, his eyes constantly scanning the cliffs above and the ground beneath their horses' hooves. The baby, wrapped snugly against Clara's chest, yawned and nuzzled closer, soot still faintly streaking her delicate skin. Clara's own hands were raw from gripping the reins, but she barely noticed. The canyon's natural shelter provided a sense of safety, yet every instinct in her told her vigilance was still necessary. "This will do," Aelin said quietly, guiding the horses to a shaded area near the pool. He dismounted first, muscles taut but fluid, movements precise and deliberate. Clara followed, careful not to stumble on the uneven rocks. The warrior crouched beside the water, cupping his hands to drink, then offered some to her. The liquid was cool, refreshing, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Clara drank slowly, savoring a moment of calm she had not felt in weeks. The canyon was a sanctuary, but Aelin did not relax. He patrolled the perimeter, each step deliberate, eyes sharp as a hawk's. The sunlight glinted off the turquoise and bone jewelry draped across his chest, and his long black hair flowed in the breeze like a dark river. Clara watched him, awe mixing with a growing admiration. She had seen him face the fire, evade pursuit, and now he stood sentinel over them with unwavering dedication. The weight of his protection settled over her like a comforting cloak. As the baby slept, Clara tended to her own wounds, the small cuts and burns she had neglected during their flight. Aylin returned, kneeling beside her without a word, observing her silently. Then, as the last light of day began to fade behind the canyon walls, he spoke. "Rest. Tonight, you are safe. Tomorrow, we move again, but tonight breathe." His voice, low and steady, carried a calm authority that eased her tension. Around the fire they built, shadows danced along the canyon walls, flickering and stretching with the flames. Aylin told stories of his people, of the plains they had roamed, of the honor codes that governed their lives. Clara listened, captivated, the baby cooing softly in her arms. For the first time since the fire, she allowed herself to believe in a future beyond mere survival. She saw in Aylin a man forged by hardship, yet capable of tenderness. His courage matched by compassion. Night deepened, and the canyon grew quiet except for the whispering of the stream and the distant cry of a lone owl. Clara rested against Aylin's side, the warmth of his body seeping into her exhausted limbs. The baby stirred, reaching up with tiny fingers that brushed against his chest. Aylin smiled faintly, his dark eyes softened by the sight. "She is brave," he said softly, "but she will need you." Clara nodded, feeling an unexpected surge of hope. The moon rose above the canyon rim, spilling silver light across the rocks and water. Stars appeared in clusters, reflected in the still pool like tiny lanterns suspended in the night. Clara felt a rare serenity, the kind she had long forgotten. For one fleeting moment, the world's cruelty seemed suspended, replaced by the gentle rhythm of flowing water, rustling pine, and a warrior's quiet vigilance. Yet, even in this refuge, danger was not entirely absent. Aylin patrolled silently, listening for distant sounds, watching for movement, his body coiled and ready. Clara understood that this peace was fragile, a temporary haven in the vast, unpredictable plains. But she also understood something more important. With Aylin at her side, with the baby safe in their arms, she had found a protector she could trust, someone who would face whatever came with unwavering courage. As the night stretched on, Clara finally allowed herself to close her eyes, the baby sleeping softly against her chest, Aylin's steady presence beside her. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a spark of hope, a fragile ember that whispered of survival, resilience, and the possibility of something stronger than fear, trust, courage, and love. By mid-afternoon, the canyon had faded behind them, replaced by the wide, dusty expanse of the plains leading back toward the town. Clara's heart pounded, each hoofbeat echoing her apprehension. She pressed her baby tighter against her chest, feeling the tiny heartbeat beneath her fingers, a fragile reminder of everything she was fighting to protect. The baby stirred and whimpered softly, sensing her mother's tension. Aylin rode beside her, bronzed skin glinting in the harsh sunlight, long black hair whipping behind him in the wind. His chest was bare, adorned with turquoise and bone jewelry that caught the sun's glare like shards of light. Muscles rippled as he guided the horse with steady precision, eyes scanning every ridge and dip for threats. Clara had come to rely on his instincts, on his quiet, unwavering authority. Without him, she knew they would never have survived the fire, the chase across the plains, or the night in the canyon. As the outskirts of the town appeared on the horizon, tension coiled in Clara's chest like a live wire. The townsfolk had already gathered in the square, the dust of the streets rising in lazy clouds around their boots. Faces were pale with fear, anger, and disbelief, each pair of eyes locking onto them with judgment. Mothers pulled children close, merchants leaned against storefronts, and men with rifles and pitchforks stepped forward, bracing for a confrontation. Clara's stomach twisted. Ylen slowed his horse to a measured walk, planting himself firmly beside Clara. He lifted her and the baby slightly higher in his arms, his stance unflinching. The crowd murmured, uncertainty rippling through them. Whispers of disbelief spread like wildfire. He did not speak immediately, letting the silence hang, the weight of his presence filling the square. Then, with a voice that cut through the tension like steel, he said, "I'm not afraid of loving you." A hush fell over the crowd. Clara's eyes widened. The words carried authority, courage, and something unexpected: defiance. Aylin held her and the baby close, as if daring the world to challenge him. His dark eyes scanned the faces before him, muscles taut and ready for any threat. Yet there was no anger in his gaze, only unwavering determination to protect the two. Lives cradled in his arms. The townsfolk shifted uneasily. Some lowered their weapons slightly, others whispered among themselves, astonished at the audacity of this stranger who dared to defy them so openly. Clara's heart thudded wildly, a mix of fear, hope, and awe coursing through her. She felt the weight of judgment, the sting of suspicion, and yet also the first true sense of safety she had known since the fire. A few of the bolder townsfolk stepped forward, testing his resolve. Aylin did not flinch. His stance was immovable, a living barrier between Clara, her child, and the world that had threatened to destroy them. "No harm will come to them while I stand here," he declared, his voice steady and resonant, carrying across the square. Even the wind seemed to pause, holding its breath in the golden dust of the afternoon. Clara's grip on the baby relaxed slightly, her own fear giving way to a tentative trust she had never imagined possible. She saw the townsfolk's expressions begin to change: confusion, reluctant admiration, and the dawning realization that this man's courage was not to be challenged lightly. Aylin's bravery was not the reckless boldness of youth, but the calm, deliberate strength of someone who had faced countless battles and emerged unbroken. As the sun dipped lower behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the square, Aylin shifted slightly, holding Clara and the baby closer. "I will protect them," he said again, softer this time, a promise rather than a challenge. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, the weight of exhaustion, fear, and gratitude colliding. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe, to hope. The crowd began to disperse slowly, some stepping back in cautious respect, others whispering among themselves. Yet the memory of this moment, the unwavering courage, the fearless declaration, the protection of the innocent, would linger in the town for years. Clara leaned against Aylin, feeling the warmth of his body, the steady heartbeat of a man who had become her shield. The baby stirred again, cooing softly, and in that fragile sound, Clara felt the promise of a new beginning. Aylin's dark eyes scanned the horizon one last time, alert to any lingering threats, yet his attention remained on Clara and the baby. He had faced the flames, the plains, the canyon, and now the judgment of the town, and he had done so unflinchingly. Clara realized that their survival, and perhaps even their future, rested not on luck or escape, but on the unwavering courage of this one man who refused to be afraid of love. The sun rose slowly over the old west town, painting the streets in streaks of gold and amber. Clara clutched her baby against her chest, feeling the warmth of life pulsing through the small bundle. Around them, the town was quiet, the echoes of yesterday's confrontation still lingering in the minds of the townsfolk. Dust settled from the previous chaos, and the smell of smoke and charred wood had faded, replaced by the crisp scent of morning sage carried on the wind. Ylen stood beside her, the very image of strength and vigilance. His long black hair flowed in the breeze, bronzed skin gleaming in the soft morning light. The turquoise and bone jewelry across his chest caught the sun's rays like fragments of fallen stars, shimmering as he moved. He held Clara's gaze for a moment, a silent promise reflected in the intensity of his dark eyes. Then, slowly, he shifted his attention to the town, scanning every alley, every roofline, every shadow. His presence alone commanded respect, his body a living shield for Clara and the baby. The townsfolk began to emerge from their homes and shops, drawn by the sight of Aylin and the family he protected. Men lowered rifles, women pulled children closer, and whispers of astonishment passed from one person to the next. Clara realized the entire town had been watching, waiting, measuring the courage of a man who had defied their fear and judgment. Aylin had faced the fire, the plains, and now their skepticism, and he had done so with unflinching resolve. A small group of townspeople stepped forward hesitantly. One of the older men, leaning heavily on a carved walking stick, spoke first. We didn't know what you'd do," he admitted, voice shaking with awe. Aylin did not respond immediately, only held Clara and the baby a little closer, as if to remind the crowd of the lives in his charge. Then he spoke, his tone calm but unwavering. "I will not let harm come to them. They are safe while I stand." Here, the town square held its collective breath. Clara felt her chest tighten, not with fear this time, but with hope. The baby stirred, tiny fingers brushing against Aylin's chest, and he smiled faintly, a rare, fleeting warmth in his dark features. He lowered his gaze to the child. "You are brave," he whispered softly, his voice carrying both reverence and encouragement. Clara's heart ached with gratitude and a burgeoning trust she had never imagined she could feel for another person. Crowd began to shift, uncertainty giving way to reluctant respect. Mothers lowered children from their arms. Some men removed hats and bowed slightly, an unspoken acknowledgement of Aylin's courage and integrity. A young boy stepped forward, wide-eyed, and offered a small bouquet of wildflowers, which Clara accepted with a tender smile. Even in this harsh, unforgiving town, the spark of human kindness had not been extinguished. Aylin turned back to Clara and the baby, his expression softening as the tension in the square eased. "You have survived much," he said quietly, almost to himself. "And now perhaps you can live." Clara pressed her cheek to the baby's hair, feeling the warmth of both child and warrior beside her. She realized that for the first time in days, she was not merely surviving, she was beginning to hope, to trust, to imagine a future. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows and bathing the town in golden light. Clara knew challenges still lay ahead, that not all fear or prejudice would vanish overnight. But with Aylin's unwavering protection and the quiet courage that radiated from him, she felt ready to face whatever came next. He had risked everything to save them, and in doing so, had shown that love and bravery could defy even the harshest. Judgment stood as the day unfolded. Aylin helped guide the townsfolk in rebuilding what had been damaged, offering strength and leadership without arrogance. Clara and the baby remained close to him, a small family forged in the crucible of fire, fear, and relentless pursuit. The townsfolk gradually accepted their presence, recognizing that true courage was not measured by wealth or status, but by the willingness to protect and care for the innocent dot. By the time the sun dipped low again, painting the town in warm amber hues, Clara stood in the square, her baby sleeping peacefully against her chest. Aylin's dark eyes met hers, and in that silent exchange, she understood something profound. They had survived, not by chance, but through courage, resilience, and the fearless willingness to love even when the world expected fear. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Clara allowed herself to smile fully, knowing that they were safe, and that the warrior who had risked everything for them would continue to protect them in the days to come. The town, once a place of judgment, And fear now held the promise of a new dawn, a future where courage, love, and hope could finally flourish.